Welcome to Amazon's Culture of Innovation. My name is Janine Moorhead. I am the Worldwide Specialist Program Manager for the Learning from Amazon and Culture of Innovation programs. I'm also a 4.5-year Amazonian. Today, I'll also be joined by my colleague, Dan Slater, the Worldwide Lead for Culture of Innovation, and we're really excited to speak to you guys today about this topic. So let's start with Amazon's mission. Amazon's mission is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. And if you look at this mission, it's fairly broad, right? It really speaks to no particular customer, no particular type of industry or segment. So it could be small to medium businesses, it could be large enterprises, any type of industry. Amazon deals with a lot of different customers, and so we really like to have this broad mission to make sure that we can encompass all of the different individuals and customers that we interact with. But if you take another look at it, it's also fairly specific. It does have a very singular focus on the customer. We really want to put the customer at the center of everything that we do and make sure that we're continuing to innovate on their behalf. Our customer centricity is really the one thing that aligns to all of our different aspects of our business, and we really hold that near and dear to our hearts. So where does innovation begin? We really want to dive deep and get a really great understanding of our customers. What are their needs? What are their pain points? And how can we solve for those? So we really like to say that we like to start with the customer and work backwards. And it's really about being close to our customers, asking them, what it is that they want, what it is that they need, but really get that deep understanding of their situations, their contacts, so we can continue to innovate on their behalf. Our goal here is to make sure that they're at the center of everything that we do, and we're continuing to create a delightful customer experience. So in 2016, Jeff Bezos wrote in his shareholder letter that customers are always beautifully and wonderfully dissatisfied. So it means no matter what you're doing, your customers may love it, but if you create something better, they'll probably love that just a little bit more. And so we're always looking to see what else can we solve for our customers? What else can we do? And we want to make sure that we continue that drive and desire to make sure that we're continuing to innovate on behalf of our customers, really putting the customer at the center of all the things that we focus on, all the things that we deliver. So we're not just inventing for invention's sake, right? We want to make sure that we get that deep understanding of our customer needs, those pain points, and understanding that really allows us to have an endless amount of ideas and allows us to continue to innovate and provide us with different inspirations to figure out how we can solve these different needs for our customers, because each of our customers are different, they're unique, and we want to make sure that we understand what it is that what they really want and what they need, and continue to deliver those results to our customers. So let's take a look at Amazon's core businesses, right? And if you take a look at the screen, they're very broad. So we've got things like e-commerce and Amazon Fresh and consumables, physical retail with Amazon 4-star stores. We have devices like Amazon Echo, Alexa, Kindle, and of course, AWS with its 200 plus features and services. And when you take a look at these, someone would say, these don't necessarily fit together. They're a little all over the place, right? But actually, they're all centered around the same thing. All of these branches of our business have stemmed from really having that customer focus and really trying to figure out how we can continue to delight these customers and solve these pain points for them. So being open, and again, this stems back to our mission of having that customer centricity, has really allowed us to branch out into a lot of different avenues, which we may not have done so otherwise if we haven't had that singular customer obsessive focus and trying to figure out those individual ways that we can continue and delight our customers. One item that really stems from that is the Amazon Go store. It's not like we set out to say, hey, let's get in the convenience store space, right? It was more so, what's the pain point with shopping? how can we solve that particular pain point for our customers? And as we started to think about that, we were like, what aspect of shopping do people really dislike? I really hate standing in line. And personally, I really do hate standing in line, especially if I'm in a hurry. So how can we solve for that? And just in trying to solve for that one particular pain point, the Amazon Go store was born, right? Where we have these cashierless stores where people can walk in, grab things, and go. So a lot of the innovations and a lot of the different businesses that we're involved in, again, really stem from that customer centricity and having that customer obsessed focus. So when thinking about that customer obsessed focus and how we can continue to innovate for our customers, we also want to ask ourselves, like, what needs do our customers have now, but also what will their needs be in the future? So we like to focus on what we would consider to be durable needs. So with these durable needs are things like price, convenience, selection, and those are represented here on the flywheel that you can see. They're based on our retail flywheel. And if you think about how this works, it starts with the customer experience. If you create a really great customer experience, then that's going to drive additional traffic. And if you have that additional traffic of customers, then you're going to get more sellers. Sellers are definitely going to want to be on your platform if they know they're reaching a lot of different individuals and a lot of different customers. And with those additional sellers, we have additional selection. And that additional selection also feeds back into our customer experience. So that holistic approach really creates a lot of additional growth. And with that growth, we can repurpose we can rescale and scale out. And as we do that, we're able to lower our cost structure. And with that lower cost structure, we can pass those savings on to our customers and again, continue to create that additional better customer experience for them. So as you can see, it really creates this closed loop flywheel by really focusing in on those durable needs for our customers that can sustain us for an ongoing purpose, not only now, but down the line as we continue to grow and branch out with our different businesses. One great example of the way that we've been able to continue to expand and focus on these durable needs for our customers is with Amazon Prime. So Prime, when it started, we offered, a faster shipping times and what have you. But as time continued, we started looking at other ways that we could delight our Prime customers. They have, different shopping needs. They are interested in a lot of different things. So over time, we've been able to integrate a lot of different aspects into the Prime membership that originally, we probably wouldn't thought of, but because we have that customer-centric focus on our customers, we've looked at and said, hey, what else can we do for our Prime members? How else can we delight them? So now we've been able to incorporate a lot of different things like Prime Reading and Twitch gaming, Prime Wardrobe, Whole Foods grocery. A lot of these things are now integrated because of the different aspects of usage that our customers and our Prime members have. So this allows them to take advantage of a lot of different aspects of Amazon and a lot of the different things that they're interested in. For myself, I'm a very avid reader, so I love Prime Reading. I love having access to so many books so quickly. So that's something that, having a general Prime membership really delighted me once they made that available to me. And I think as we continue to go into the future, we'll continue to look at what else can we do to continue to make that delightful experience for our customers without a significant increase in cost. So we're allowing them to take advantage of all of these different aspects of things between music, books, movies, gaming, all of these different aspects that originally started with just shipping, and now it's branched out into so many different areas by focusing on those needs of our customers, those durable needs. AWS is another great example of that, and the durable needs around AWS tend to be our breadth and depth of services, our security, reliability, scalability, all of these different features that our customers have come to know us for and love about AWS. So as we continue to grow, we continue to look at the different aspects of our business and the different features that we're offering to continue to provide that next level of service for our customers? How else can we continue to innovate on their behalf? How can we look around those corners to see what the next best feature will be for, say, EC2 or Amazon S3, or how else we can continue to grow those aspects of the business? And as you can see, over time, we've had at least 109 price reductions. We've had 200 plus fully featured services. We have over 100,000 partners to assist our customers across the globe. And we've had a lot of significant new feature services and releases over time. And we've had 2,500 plus features released in 2020 alone. So we continue to innovate and continue to make a better customer experience for our AWS customers as well. You know, we don't think that there'll ever be a time where our AWS customers will come to us and say, hey, AWS, I just really wish my servers would go down a little bit more, or I really wish AWS was just a little bit less secure. We probably won't hear that anytime soon, but we'll always be striving to give them that next level of service to make sure that we continue to make things more secure and more available for all of our customers. So now that we've kind of gotten that level set and kind of grounded you in our customer-centric approach, let's dig into how we actually organize ourselves here around innovation. And it really boils down to 4 different elements. The first one is our culture, which really speaks to our customer obsession, the principles that we believe in, and kind of the way we guide ourselves on a daily basis to make sure we're continuing to have that customer centricity and focus. The second part is our mechanisms. You need things in place to make sure that you're really turning those ideas into actionable items. And then there's that architecture. When you have builders, you really need to support them with that underlying architecture so that they can continue to build and innovate. And finally, we'll dig into our organization and the way that we structure ourselves to make sure that we can have that speed and agility in business.
That was great, Janine. Thanks. I'm Dan Slater. I'm the worldwide lead of culture of innovation at AWS. And with that background and underpinning of what drives our customer centricity, we'll now dive into these 4 elements, starting with our culture. You need the people to operate a system of innovation and give them a unifying set of beliefs. And one of the mechanisms that we use to drive that consistency in our culture and in our focus on our customers is our leadership principles. At Amazon, we hold ourselves and each other responsible for demonstrating these 16 leadership principles in our actions every day. These leadership principles describe how Amazon does business, how we want leaders to lead, and how we keep the customer at the center of every decision that we make. You'll notice that these are just the headlines of these leadership principles. Each has a descriptive line of text behind them, and you can read them by going to this link that's shared here. Our leadership principles start with customer obsession, but there's no real order or hierarchy to them. You also might notice that there's some tension between some of these leadership principles. For example, diving really deep could potentially slow down bias for action. How do you simultaneously dive deep and think big? We have a leadership principle about disagreeing and committing. Well, our leadership principles were never designed to be harmonious. And in fact, they're really they're meant to be used together in order to make us really focus on the customer and make faster and higher quality decisions. We use these as guideposts in our decisions and weigh the priorities that we need to think about at the time we need to make a decision. They help us frame conversations and decisions that are often really complex and also force us to look at problems from multiple different angles. For example, you need to be biased for action and move fast at the speed of business and meet your customers' needs. But at the same time, you're going to want to really dive deep at the right level just to inform and validate your approach and to mitigate any risk. We need to lead and think big with bold, visionary ideas for customers, but we also need to dive deep so that we have the right details when we execute it. We encourage employees to have backbone and voice disagreement or even diverse opinions and bring those to the table. That fosters a lot of rich discussion and brings a lot of diverse viewpoints that at the end helps us get to the right decisions on behalf of our customers. But once we get to that decision, we want everybody to commit to it. And regardless of what side of the discussion you are on, you really need to commit to the decision that's made and then focus all of our energy on executing it and making it happen. You'll also notice that we say, these are our leadership principles, unless you know better ones. Well, our leadership principles have stayed fairly consistent, but they aren't set in stone. They have changed over time as Amazon's business has changed and grown and scaled. For example, we added Learn and Be Curious in 2015. And in July of 2020, we added 2 new leadership principles: Strive to be Earth's best employer, and Success and Scale bring broad responsibility. We have a philosophy at Amazon that everybody is a leader. And part of that leadership is really using these leadership principles every day. And we do use them pervasively, not just in the decisions that we make, but also in our hiring practices. We ask candidates to frame their examples against these leadership principles. We use them to give each other feedback, and they're used in performance dialogue between managers and employees to help growth. And at the end of the day, what these leadership principles really do is provide us with a common vernacular. And as I said, we really do use them every day. I want to dive into a few of them in detail, just to give you an idea of what they look like in practice. I'll start off with the first one on the list, which is customer obsession. This leadership principle really helps set the tone for all of the other leadership principles and for everything that we do at Amazon. It starts by saying that we put the customer at the center of everything that we do, and we work backwards from there. It sets an expectation of tirelessly working to create incredible customer experiences, because today's wow quickly becomes tomorrow's ordinary, and customers are only loyal until they find a better way. We use that specific word obsess over customers. It's a very deliberate. It's not just good enough to think about your customers, but you really have to systematically and constantly keep your focus on their needs, on the opportunities, on what they want, on their pain points in life. And you really need to strive to surprise and delight them in everything that you do every day. So this leadership principle really is the North Star that helps us stay focused on just those things that are important to our customers. I want to share an anecdote with you to really show how customer obsession is put into play at Amazon. And back in the early days of Amazon, Jeff encouraged that whenever we gathered in a conference room for a meeting, that there should always be an empty chair in that conference room. And we're reserving it in that way for the most important person in the room, the customer. This was a symbolic but a really powerful and visible reminder that framed the decisions that we were going to make in that meeting. Not what was going to be best for our business or propel profit or help us reach our goals, but what was going to be the right thing to do for our customers. This tradition persists in many different ways at Amazon today. And what you see here is what we call our Empty Chair Award. And this is given every year in recognition of an Amazonian who really demonstrated customer obsession by going above and beyond to earn and keep our customers' trust. Let's now look at another leadership principle, invent and simplify, specifically because it speaks to innovation. There are many different ways that you can meaningfully innovate with bold and visionary ideas, but you can also innovate by simplifying. One seemingly small and maybe insignificant cost or time savings, when it's scaled across millions of processes or millions of customers, can drive enormous benefits, not just to your business, but to your customers. And that innovation, it can come internally from the great builders that we have at Amazon, but it can also be inspired by external ideas and trends. And a core concept of this leadership principle is that you may have to be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. And a great example of being willing to be misunderstood for a long period of time is our Kindle. Many people questioned our device when we first launched it in 2007. We weren't the first company, after all, to release an ebook reader. In fact, we had no history in the hardware device business. And the Kindle device was actually kind of big and heavier than a lot of the paperback books that were available. And there were questions about why we would release a device that may impact the sales of physical books on Amazon. Well, we may not have had the most elegant or incredible design right out of the gate, but our design philosophy wasn't focused on creating the slickest device that we could. Instead, it was about ensuring that we created the most incredible reading experience for our customers. And that as customers were reading on the Kindle, they had that experience that, just like reading from a real book, it made the Kindle kind of disappear in their hands to the point that they were only focused on the author's words and the world that they were creating. And once you add to that experience all the convenience of accessing millions of books and carrying around an entire library of content with you in your back pocket, the ability to download content, whether wirelessly or through free cellular connectivity without having to sideload into a computer, along with so many other features, you now started to have a device that could do things far beyond what the capabilities of an ordinary book were. We believed in the long-term value that customers would always seek out the simplicity of being able to easily find a book, start downloading it, and begin to read it really, really quickly. Any book ever published in any language, all in 60 seconds or less. That was and remains to this day Kindle's mission. It's simple, it's reader-centric, and it's focused on that durable need of accessibility, convenience, and a great reading experience. And of course, over time, we've improved the device, with today's versions being lighter, thinner, more performant, better battery life. You're able to read them in bright daylight or in dim light, and some are even waterproof. Another leadership principle we have that I want to share with you is bias for action, which states that speed matters in business. Many decisions and actions are reversible, and they don't need really extensive study, and because we want to value calculated risk-taking. So how do we decide when it's appropriate to move quickly? Well, a clue to that is actually in the description of this leadership principle. It's whether it's reversible. One helpful mental model that we've developed over time at Amazon is this concept of one-way doors versus two-way doors. One-way doors are those decisions that have really significant and irrevocable consequences. They really need deep deliberation, analysis, and study. Examples could include building a new fulfillment center or a new data center for our AWS business. These really require careful thought and extensive planning and a lot of capital investment. And they're hard to reverse once you've started to break ground on them. Two-way doors, on the other hand, are those decisions that have limited and reversible consequences. And these allow you to experiment quickly, get out and learn very quickly with how consumers are using your products. This could be, for example, a new feature on a mobile app. These are these decisions that you could make rapidly, iterate quickly as you learn, and then maybe even reverse altogether if they're not working how you think they should. When we see a two-way door decision at Amazon and we think that by walking through that two-way door will benefit customers, we'll just do it. We will walk right through that door. And whether that idea succeeds or fails, either way, we'll learn a lot about our customers and how they accept or use that product, service, or tool. And we can apply those lessons with the next iteration or our next innovation. We teach Amazonians that they should be moving fast and making those decisions when they have about maybe 70% of the information that they wish they had. Because if you're waiting around for more than that, you're likely going to be moving too slow.
So now that you know a little bit more about our culture, let's dive into the next element of how we organize ourselves around innovation, which is our mechanisms. And so mechanisms are encoded behaviors that really help us to turn those good intentions into actions. You know, when you encounter a problem, you always want to make sure that you solve it, but you want to make sure that you're putting that mechanism in place that a lot of people can follow and make sure that we're actually following through consistently to solve those problems or get additional information. So a mechanism is a complete process. It's a virtuous cycle, and it continues to improve itself over time. And at Amazon, we love to use mechanisms to make sure that we can continue to solve different problems and continue to iterate and improve upon those things. And there's a lot of mechanisms that we use here. One of them is the Amazon and Accord. We allow our frontline customer service associates to be able to remove defective product from our Amazon catalog, so we can continue to provide our customers, with good service and good products. We also use different mechanisms in our day-to-day business. So one of those would be our quarterly business reviews, our monthly business reviews. We utilize these mechanisms to make sure that we get that deeper understanding of our business. We're communicating to our upper leadership so they get an understanding of what each of our teams are doing, so we can continue to solve and iterate on different issues and problems. And one of our hallmark mechanisms is the working backwards process. And this is one that we use to produce any new product or service. Every new customer-facing product or service developed uses the Amazon working backwards process. The mechanism really makes sure that we're providing the right thing for our customers. We're thinking it through. We're making sure that we remain customer obsessed from the very beginning of any idea that we have here at Amazon or at AWS. So the output of the working backwards process is threefold. So we have our press release, our FAQ, and our visuals. And as always, everything that we do starts with the customer. So we want to know who they are, what are their needs, what pain points do they have. And we usually will say that here at AWS, 90% of the features that we develop are from the things that our customers have expressed to us. It's from their feedback, and they've said, hey, can you create this new feature for us? Or I'd love to see this new service. So about 90% of the things that we do create come from that. That additional 10% really comes from us kind of reading between the lines and working backwards from our customers to understand what it is that we think that they really want and how we can continue to invent on their behalf. And so you may be asking yourself, well, how do you determine when an idea is ready for you to spend all of that time to write a PRFAQ and go through that process? Well, of course, we have a mechanism for that, and that's called our 5 customer questions. And within these questions, they're very simplistic when you first look at them. So they answer things like, who's the customer? Is the most important customer benefit clear? How do you know what customers need or want? What does that customer experience look like? And so you could spend 5 minutes on these questions. You could probably spend 5 months or more on these questions. It really just depends on the level of detail that you need and what you're looking for. But the idea behind the questions is to really get that good sense of where you are in the process, does what you're refining your approach, making sure that you have the answers to these before proceeding. And once you get a good semblance of these questions answered and you really feel comfortable with them, then you are ready to start the working backwards process. So let's dive a little deeper into the process itself. So the first output of the working backwards process is the PR. And the PR, or the press release, really allows us to take that sneak peek into the future and say, what would I want to say about this product once it's actually released? So within the PR, it's a one-page narrative that really starts to speak to the customer benefit. It tells you what the customer would be able to achieve with it. It also has some fictitious quotes from the customer. So we have to think through, what would we want our customer to say about this experience? What did they get from utilizing this product and or service? So we start developing that before we do any kind of building. We don't write any line of code before we get a good handle on our press release and make sure that it really expresses those needs that we want our customers to, that we're solving for our customer, and making sure that they understand and have that good understanding of what the product is for. The second part of the PR is the FAQ. And these frequently asked questions address things that our customers would want to know. So the first part is the external and then the internal, because you have stakeholders on both sides. So in terms of the external FAQs, they address things such as how would this interact with some of my other products? What will be the cost of it? Different things that our, customers may want to know. The internal FAQs address things that your internal stakeholders may want to know, like why is this the right solution right now? Or how does this, for AWS example, how does this integrate with some of our other products and services? So we want to make sure that we think through all of these things. And even though the PR itself is typically one page, the FAQ could be 4, 5, 6 pages or more. It really just depends on how deeply we're diving in to make sure that we're addressing all of these questions and answering them on both sides for our internal and external stakeholders. The last part of the PR FAQ is the visuals. So the visuals don't have to be robust as they are here on the screen. They could be stick figures, but really what we want the visuals to communicate are the things that we can't really get across via words. So we want to express the idea visually to make sure you can read between the lines of exactly what we're trying to communicate to the customer. Once the PR FAQ doc is written, then we like to share it across Amazon with our other stakeholders. So these could be members of your team, it could be some of your leadership, all different individuals that you may be close to that you just want to bounce the idea off of. But the idea around it is to make sure that you can get that additional feedback, those different perspectives from other individuals in the business to make sure that you're iterating on it and that we're answering all those questions. So should the idea be even bigger? Is this the right solution? So bouncing those ideas off of these different SMEs and other people in the business allow you to reiterate and continue to improve upon your doc. The first narrative is never going to be complete. It's never done. Even after tons of iteration, it could still be in flux just a little bit. But the idea is that we want to continue to refine and hone those ideas. And, putting your narrative in front of a lot of individuals can be scary. I know the first time that I went into a doc read, I was like, oh my goodness, all these people are marking up my paper. But it's all helpful. It's all produces really great dialogue. It brings in a lot of different perspectives and it allows you to think through your idea at even more so you can make sure that you're delivering the right product for your customer. And it allows us to think big across the organization because everyone at Amazon, no matter where you are, can utilize the working backwards process. You could write a PR for any aspect of the business, even if it's not one that you particularly work in. It's just, do you have a passion for that? Do you have an idea that you really want to get out there? Then you're more than welcome to start writing that PR. It's also a great way to just share innovation across your team. Let other people know what you're thinking. How can they help you to expand upon that? And you guys can really start to collaborate. And it also is a very low cost way to innovate. I mean, ideas are frequent, they're cheap. And so, as you continue to reiterate, it allows some of these ideas to start flowing really easily at a very low cost. And so all of the PRs that we create don't necessarily make it to full production, but it is a great way to start thinking of other ideas and refining those ideas that may get to production or may feed into other ideas that we may have down the line.
The third element that we'll examine about how we approach innovation and organize towards innovation will be our architecture. We hire people who are excited to wake up every day and look for customer experiences that they can improve or iterate or reinvent altogether. People who are excited about building the future on behalf of our customers. But you need to provide these builders a performant architecture and a platform and a robust set of tools that really enables them to invent that future and frees them up from constraints. We've learned how to do this through our own journey, and I'll share a little bit about that with you now. More than a decade ago, Amazon, like a lot of other companies at the time, had a single monolithic architecture. And all business logic and features were all centralized within this monolithic architecture. and everyone was coding against it as well. And this tightly coupled architecture was really efficient when Amazon was small. But as the company and as the business scaled, it began to start impacting the speed with which we could launch new services or address things that we wanted to on behalf of customers. You couldn't change, for example, code without really risking affecting downstream services. There could also be potentially longer waits for build and deployment resources against the single monolithic architecture. And people really started to struggle to coordinate and even communicate. There was no clear lines around who owned which code. You really had to research that, and that took time. It started to create a little bit of inflexibility and impacted the speed of our business. And we just weren't making progress as fast as we really wanted to. So around the year 2000, we started the process of breaking down this monolithic architecture into a microservices-oriented architecture. We started separating this monolithic architecture into discrete domains and databases. For example, one specifically for orders, another for fulfillment, one for our website, one for customers and their data, and so forth. And then started building in front of these databases singly built purpose services in front of them. So, for example, a single standalone microservice was just dedicated to surfacing the price of a product on Amazon. Another calculated taxes. A separate microservice could look at the availability and surface that on the detail page. Today, there are hundreds of thousands of these microservices across Amazon. And the diagram that you're looking at here is just one part of our AWS business, with each small blue dot representing that single standalone microservice. You actually do see some lines or shading that represent how some of these microservices call upon each other, but you can still see that they are single standalone services. And they really form discrete building blocks that help us move fast in our business. All of the underlying business logic and data are all within one single service, and they're only exposed through others or to the business through hardened APIs. This highly decoupled architecture really allowed services to run independently of each other. They also allowed us to iterate services without impacting downstream services, or to create new ones without creating latency or additional dependencies. Another benefit of this microservice architecture was that in this highly decoupled approach, it really allowed us to move to the cloud ourselves really rapidly. Migrating and validating the microservices is much easier than having to do it as one huge monolithic architecture. By doing this, we really fundamentally changed the way we were able to do business and what we were able to innovate on behalf of our customers. There was no longer gatekeepers for resources. There was no long waits for storage or compute resources. Or if you wanted to start machine learning, you could just start using it through that microservice. In the past, when you asked engineering teams how long it would take to get started and to get up some servers to really start running fast, the answer might have been multiple weeks. Well, in the cloud, you can provision thousands of servers within minutes. And with AWS, you now have access to over 200 fully performant and robust tools and services that you can put together in any combination that you need to. And what this does is really benefit the speed in which you can address your customers' needs and also run fast on all those amazing ideas that your employees are coming up with. Because they know if they have that incredible idea, they have a chance to start testing, iterating, getting it out to customers, and learning right away. This microservices architecture also expanded the group of people in our company that could think about and act on these ideas from potentially a select few to now everybody. Our architecture really supports and accelerates the way we can address innovation and address our customers' needs really in three big ways. First, we're able to prototype really rapidly. With AWS, you have access to a very robust set of tools and a technology offering that lets you go from idea to implementation in record time. Second, it really lowers the costs of failure as it expands the group of people thinking and experimenting and testing different things with customers. It really increases the amount of ideas that are being acted upon because people know that as they have them, they can just go and experiment. And with that pay-as-you-go pricing, it's much cheaper to experiment. You can scale up or down, you can really only pay for what you're using, and if an idea isn't working, you can just turn it off altogether. The third really big benefit is that when we do find something that works, we can scale it incredibly rapidly. AWS enables customers to deploy globally in minutes, and with the elasticity to really flex with business needs, whether that's through seasonality or spikes, and basically adjust automatically to the needs of your business.
Thanks, Dan. And we're now at the last element of the way we organize ourselves for innovation, and that is our organization. And how do we organize ourselves for speed and agility? So Amazon hires builders. We want to make sure that we find people that want to invent and want to build on behalf of our customers. But to do that, you need to make sure that you're empowering these teams to invent on behalf of our customers and that we're setting them up in the right way so they can just focus on what they need to do and really dig in onto the way that they build these new products and services. And one way that we do that is through a distinctly Amazonian term called two pizza teams. And we say that these are teams that should be no larger than that can be fed by two medium-sized pizzas. And we do like to say that these are probably American-sized pizzas because I know everywhere else they're a little bit smaller. But just in thinking about it, it's a team that's kind of like a little bit of a startup between 8 and 10 individuals that are focused on a particular area of the business so they can really run fast, get a deep understanding of their customers and their area of the business, the metrics, know it inside and out so they can continue to build it quickly, rapidly, and deliver results to our customers. So each two pizza team has a single threaded owner, and these single threaded owners are focused on that specific product and or service. And so they're really working with those individual teams to make sure that they, again, have that understanding of the business. They take complete ownership of it. So when they spark up a new idea, they want to run with a new program or what have you, they have the ability, the autonomy to do so. The two pizza team also increases the accountability, right? It promotes that accountability by saying, hey, this is your area of the business. You own this. We want to make sure that you understand your customers, doing what's best for them. You own the metrics, the KPIs, and you're consistently trying to drive additional results in your particular area of the business. And so that really, having these small centralized two pizza teams really removes a lot of the bureaucracy and very complicated discussions that may otherwise would have need to happen if, say, the organization or those particular teams were a lot larger. We also need to make sure that within those two pizza teams that we have the right individuals embedded in those teams. So that can include couple of engineers. It also can include a program manager or what have you. You want to make sure that you have the right mix of individuals that will, again, allow you to have that speed and agility and run with the product or service that you are creating. So in the end, the two pizza team isn't so much about the size, but we really want to focus on that ownership, that accountability, and making sure that we get that deep understanding of the business. So all of these teams have their very specific scope and remit to make sure that they're delivering on their portion of that business. So let's double click into that a little bit and talk a little bit more about those single-threaded owners. So as we continue to grow and expand, we don't necessarily grow the teams out. What we do is we break things down into smaller two pizza teams, and so we can maintain that structure. We want to keep the organization relatively flat. So sometimes the multiple two pizza teams can reside underneath a single threaded owner. And this allows us to scale not only vertically, but horizontally as well as we continue to grow and expand. So we have these single threaded owners that are responsible for one or two pizza teams so they can help us with the governance, the accountability, the ownership, and help us to make rapid decisions in terms of resources, and that can address that scale as we continue to grow out. So a great example of this is EC2. You could have a few individuals working on specific features or services. Someone else could be focused on, say, the virtual machines and things of that nature. So different aspects of the same product. But even though they're working on different pieces, they are all still singularly focused on making sure that we're providing the best features and services for our customers around that product. So they all have their specific ownership. They are all able to dig into their particular area of the business. They're still responsible. They're still accountable. They still have that ownership. And really removing those barriers and having these single-threaded owners really allows us to innovate quickly and rapidly and move forward really fast. Now, one thing that our two pizza team structure cannot do, unfortunately, is guarantee success. And so when you're experimenting, you're probably going to fail, right? Or otherwise it's not an experiment. And so in 2015, in Jeff Bezos' shareholder letter, he noted that failure and invention are inseparable twins. You really cannot have one without the other. But when you do these experiments and you take these big bets, the big winners are going to pay off for doing all of these different experiments. And if you know something is going to succeed, is it really an experiment? Probably not, right? So we accept experimentation and failure as an inevitability. It's going to happen. Those are just the things that happen when you're experimenting and experimenting rapidly, right? You're going to have some failures, but having those experiments can really pay off in the long run if you take these big bets and you take these chances and you have a culture that embraces that failure. And here at Amazon, we've had quite a few failures. So we actually failed at our auction market twice. So we started out with Amazon Auctions in 1999, and that was kind of our competitor to eBay, if you will, but that didn't technically work out for us too well. And then we tried again with Z Shops, which would let anybody sign up to host their own virtual store to sell their Amazon products. But that didn't really work out too well for us either. However, with these different experiments, we gathered a lot of lessons learned, and a lot of those have helped us feed into Amazon's marketplace today, which has been fairly successful for our company. And so taking those lessons learned, we were able to build upon them, grow from them, until we found something that was really able to stick and resonate with our customers. Another failure that we've had that was fairly public was the Amazon Fire Phone. So about a year after the Fire Phone or so was released, it didn't really do that well, and we ended up writing off about $170 million worth of inventory. So, that's quite a bit, in my opinion. But, from those lessons learned, we learned a lot about developing hardware. A lot of the individuals that worked to create the Amazon Fire Phone went on to help, create some of the items that we have for the Amazon Alexa and Echo. So we've been able to build on those lessons, learn from those lessons. And so we have that ability to experiment. We know we may fail, but the key focus that we want to keep at the forefront of our minds is not the failure that incurred. It's the lessons learned. How can we build upon those things? How can we create the next best thing? And so if you're not trying, if you're not inventing, you're not failing, then you're not really inventing if you're not failing. So we want to make sure that we continue to reiterate, try, learn, and grow so we can continue to innovate on behalf of our customers and expand our products and services. So now we're at the end of the presentation, but just want to give you guys a quick reminder of what we discussed around these 4 elements. So the first was our culture. It really speaks to how we have these set level of beliefs around our leadership principles that help us guide ourselves, bring everybody on the same page in terms of the way we want to deliver results for our customers, really speaking to that customer centricity and that customer obsession and focus, and making sure that we're hiring those builders. The second part are our mechanisms. Those are the things that we have in place to make sure that we can bring those good intentions into action frequently and quickly. We also have our architecture that really supports our builders, allows them to move at a faster clip, and can make sure that they continue to grow and change whenever they need to. So we have that flexibility. And finally, we have our organization that is designed in these small, empowered teams that allow us to have speed and agility. We don't really get caught up in these deep, complex conversations because everyone owns what their area of the business and allows them to run much faster in those areas. Thank you all for joining Dan and I for Amazon's Culture of Innovation. We hope that you found it beneficial and informative, and we hope to see you again real soon. Thank you, everybody.